Welcome to Lacrosse Recruiting 101, where the biggest names in lacrosse share their inside views and expertise. Now, your host, Luke Cometti.
In this episode of the podcast, I talk with Pat March, entering his first season as an assistant coach and offensive coordinator for Syracuse University. Prior to Syracuse, Pat was the offensive coordinator at Princeton University for 3 seasons, University of Vermont for 3 seasons, Dickinson College for 2 seasons, and Roanoke College, his alma mater, for a season. In addition to college coaching, Pat also is an offensive coordinator in the Major Lacrosse League for the Atlanta Blaze. With this being the first coaching change in 12 years at Syracuse University, it was great to talk with Pat about his transition to the Orange program and how things are changing for him as a recruiter and a coach, going from an Ivy League school to an ACC school. We also cover a wide variety of topics, including players using social media to help and not hurt their chances of getting recruited, how to decide what level of college lacrosse is right for you, and also what Pat looks for in a player that he wants to come play for him at Syracuse. If I missed something or there's something you would like to hear on the next podcast, then please email us at questions@lacrosserecruiting101.com or tweet at our Twitter handle @laxrecruit101. Thanks for listening. Coach Pat March, assistant coach, offensive coordinator at Syracuse University. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me, man. Appreciate it.
Of course. So I think the last time I saw you was a few years back at the Dallas Deuces camp that Saran puts on. And it was kind of a funny story because I was chatting with you for a while. It was maybe, sunny, 55 degrees. You were down from Princeton. You had the long sleeve tee, the shorts on. And then sure enough, in the matter of minutes, sun goes away, low 30s, windy. I was scrambling. I had 2 coats on. I had sweatpants, gloves, hat. Sure enough, I see you across the field. You're still just long sleeve tee and shorts.
Yeah. Nobody told me that the weather was cold in Dallas at night. So I just only packed shorts that trip, but it worked out.
Yeah, you made it, and you must have enjoyed it somewhat because now you're up in Syracuse with some similar weather. First off, congratulations on the job as a alumni. I couldn't be happier. I know you'll do big things, and I know a lot of fellow alumni feel the same way.
Thank you.
So maybe just real quick, kind of describe to us what it was like maybe coaching or talking to Coach Desko taking this job. Just describe to us that process.
Yeah, Syracuse has always been a job that's interested me. The style of play is the style of play that I played in college. I played in high school. Kind of that up tempo, a little bit freelance, a little bit player friendly style of offense. So talking to Coach Desko and kind of getting to know the opening that they had, I thought it was a great opportunity. That being said, my wife is also from upstate New York, so it was a good transition for us as a family as well.
Win-win. So how has the transition been? You've been there a couple months now from, Princeton to Syracuse. Is it kind of what you expected? Has there been any surprises, differences?
Yeah, the transition to Syracuse has been very, very easy thanks to the coaching staff and the players and really an amazing support staff that we have here. There's always so many different nuances coming into a new job. You got to get your computer set up, setting up email, copy machine code, getting organized and just getting up so you can actually kind of do the business part of coaching. It's been a very easy process. They've been very helpful in getting me started. And on the field with the guys, it's been great. We have a lot of talent, so that makes things easy.
Yeah,
practice is always enjoyable.
For sure. And how about the transition from a recruiter standpoint? Are the guys you've had your eye on at Princeton the same guys you now have your eye on at Syracuse? Maybe the 21s, Ivy League to ACC, 2 big programs, but different.
Yep. There's certain players out there, I think, that have their sights set on an Ivy League school. So there were guys that I was recruiting at Princeton that may want the Ivy League experience, that we're not recruiting any longer here. But as far as recruiting goes, coming in and being hired right around September 1st and not being able to make phone calls on September 1st was a little challenging. It's never good to kind of sit back and not be able to recruit players that you watched all summer, especially when you know they're getting phone calls from other schools and have to kind of sit on your hands due to the HR process and that kind of doing what it needed to do there. But Coach Rogers did a great job of handling the load and making a lot of recruiting calls, doing the job with pretty much two assistants until I could get on board, start making phone calls. And then from there, it's, recruiting's recruiting. It's really just, different products at different schools, different niches, but recruiting's recruiting.
Yeah. So you guys have a prospect day coming up Sunday. Will this be your first official recruiting event as a Syracuse coach? And, what are you hoping to get out of the prospect day?
Yeah, this will be the first one. I think in prospect days, they're great resources for coaching staffs on recruiting. You get instant evaluation, instant classification of players. It's a great way for a player to get a feel for the coaching staff in school because you're on the campus. And for us, it's a great way for us to even interact with players, especially players that we can't normally interact with, who are 2022s or younger, only being able to call 21s right now. It gives us an advantage in being able to interact and coach those younger guys as well. But yeah, I think just for this weekend, getting to know the guys that come and kind of evaluating them and seeing where they're at, that's how we'll get started.
I hear other coaches say with their prospect days, they like to treat it almost as a visit as well. Do you guys take the players around campus or at least the athletic facilities?
Yeah, the players here for prospect day, we'd like to kind of run them through what would be kind of typically a practice in the early part of a prospect day. And then that second half, they're going to play some games. All the while, they'll get to see the facilities. We have a ton of the support staff and people around. They'll get to meet them, people that they'll spend a lot of time with during their career here at Syracuse if they choose to be a player here. So that's kind of, we try and give them as much of the athletic experience as we can. We don't take them down to the main part of campus, but we do show them around athletic facilities.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sure a lot of them take advantage of that. If they're already on campus anyway, it's an easy walk across to the quad and whatnot.
Definitely.
So later this fall, when you're sitting on the sidelines of a recruiting event, whether it be a recruiting tournament for club teams or, an individual showcase, whatever it may be, describe to us what you're looking for in players to potentially come play for you at Syracuse.
So the first thing that it's kind of a process, I would say recruiting is, it starts with us sitting down and the actual evaluation. You have to get out there and you see the prospects play. I try and pick a variety of events, variety of locations, so you get to see so many different players in different areas.
Yeah.
Especially early in the process when you're starting to really kind of recruit 21s or 22s now too as well. You want to do some events in different parts of the country, whether it's the South or out in California in the West, the North, the New England area. Make sure you get down to Baltimore and all those areas as well, just so that you're getting a broad base. You're able to evaluate as many players as you can. And what you're looking for, in a nutshell, you're looking for the best lacrosse players out there. You're looking for guys who are extremely fundamentally sound and athletic, that you think can play on your team at the next level. I think the next part of the recruiting process that really comes into hand is the classification of players. And I actually think this is the most important process for us as coaches. You watch guys play and you think that they can play for you at the next level, but you need to classify them. You don't, are you a lefty shooter? Are you a two-way midfielder? Are you a crease attackman?
Yeah.
And you do that so that you're not recruiting. You are recruiting. You're not you're not recruiting 3 lefty attackmen and 4 crease players, because when you start to put an offense together on the field, that won't work out too well for you if you don't have any righties. So you have to kind of classify them. So as we start to get out there, once you identify a player as somebody that you think that can play at your level, you're going to kind of classify them into whatever your program really classifies it as, position-wise. And then from there, you start to organize and get lists going. And you really, organization is the next piece, and you have to be very organized. You're hitting the trail, hitting the recruiting trail. It's mid-October to mid-January now, some of these events. Then you have mid-May to early August with the events in the summer. You're constantly evaluating, you're constantly classifying guys, and you're constantly re-ranking guys. And then once you start with that ranking, and then that's when September 1 and you start to contact guys.
Yeah. So it sounds like you being a Syracuse coach now is not going to differ very much from when you were a Princeton coach or even a Vermont coach from a recruiting standpoint. So you're not looking for the guys that are playing the Syracuse style. You're looking for the best players who will eventually play the Syracuse style if they come to Syracuse. Is that correct?
Yeah. I think you're looking for guys who have the Syracuse style of play, but you're also looking for guys that are going to have the fit in the system. I think it's really important. We want to recruit the best players in the country, but you don't want to recruit the top 4 attackmen in the country if they're all right-handed attackmen. Hope you get the best player in the country, but you want to make sure you get a left-handed attackman in there as well, and you're very organized. And then you do the same thing the next year and the same thing the next year after. It's just very important that you bring in a class as a whole and it's very organized and balanced positionally.
What are some of the differences you find in recruiting when you took the jump from the D3 level to the D1 level? You're at Dickinson, Roanoke, your alma mater, being top D3 schools, especially when you were there, to then Vermont, Princeton, and now Syracuse. And I asked this question also, and do you have advice to players who are unsure where they want to end up?
Yeah, I think that the main difference in recruiting is you hear, as a coach, you probably know a little bit more at the Division III level, which was a good thing for me as a young assistant, because you will hear no in the recruiting process.
Yeah.
You kind of got to cast that net pretty wide and look for different things that you get and you latch onto, and then and sell your program from there. But the difference between a high-level Division III and Division I is really the depth of size and athleticism. I think that if you look at a Division III team and you look at some of the Division I teams, the higher end Division III, when you start to look at their second team and third team, the players get smaller. They're a little less more athletic than what you would see on the second and third team at a Division I school. So I think that's the large difference between the two. There's many top Division III players that could play Division I, and not all Division I players would be all conference players or even starters at Division III schools. That's just, I think, kind of how it falls. My advice to players is explore any and all options that you have. If it's not for you, tell the coach and be clear about it, but you should at least go on the school's website if you're getting a phone call from them or an email. Try and do your due diligence and see maybe they have a program that you really want academically. Maybe you have a connection to the coach that you didn't know about. Maybe there's some guys that you played club lacrosse with there that you didn't even really know about. So I would just say explore every option and all the options that you have, because there are some good schools there in Division III.
Yeah, that's great advice, because when I think of players exploring their options, sometimes, especially, I'm coaching down here in Texas, guys will be like, oh, I just want to play at the highest level, or, the best school that recruits me. But we've seen time and time again where when that happens, it doesn't end up working out. And it's one of those things, I use the analogy, it's kind of like money doesn't correlate to happiness after a certain amount, right? If you're going to play college lacrosse, whether you play D3 or D1, doesn't necessarily going to make your experience better just by playing D1. You need to find the right fit.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Some of the experiences at top D3, at least the two programs that I was lucky enough to work with, are very similar to Division I. They run their programs that way. The only difference being is athletic scholarships.
Yeah. So Describe the typical process, or maybe even the ideal process, from the first time a player catches your eye to him signing his national letter of intent. Right? What's that time frame like? How many times have you watched him play? How are you in contact with him? What are some things you want to see from maybe him or even the parents?
Yeah, I think that going back to kind of how the whole recruiting process starts, it starts with us getting out and evaluating as many kids as we can. And then once we evaluate, we classify. Once you get them classified, you organize them and you start to rank them. The recruiting timeline for contact has kind of shrunk for us a little bit, with September 1st being the first time you can contact a player. And, a few years back with the early recruiting, it was kind of the wild, wild west. A lot of the recruiting was taking place right on the sideline, where if we saw a player and they were playing well and we thought they'd be a good fit, we may go right up to the club coach and talk to them right there. We can't do that anymore with the grades we're recruiting. So with that being said, you have to be organized in compiling these lists and preparing yourself for September 1. And then September 1, you reach out, you hope to develop a relationship. There's an information share that's happening there. They're learning a little bit from you about the school, about you as a coach. You're learning a little bit from them, grades, what they're looking for in a school, whether it be big or small, urban or rural, what they want to study. And then you hope that over a week or 2 weeks, you start to develop a relationship, and then the next step will be getting guys to campus for visits. And then once you get them on campus for a visit, you're really just trying to show them the day and life of a lacrosse player at your respective university. And I will debunk a large myth that I think is out there. I think a lot of people talk about athletic scholarship money, and it's a very real thing that there's only 12.6 for an entire team. So not every player is getting a lot of athletic scholarship money. There are many different ways that schools can provide money, through merit money if you're a great student, through financial aid money, need-based. There's many different ways and vehicles that you can use to afford school, but I think the days, maybe in football and basketball, but not so much in lacrosse, you're not going to hear of many full rides or things like that happening. Scholarship money has to be broken up to be able to balance and manage a roster.
Yeah, and that's something I think, being in Texas, parents hear, there's scholarships in lacrosse. Football is very popular. Most big football schools, even smaller football schools, I'd say 90% of the teams on a full scholarship. That's not the case in lacrosse.
Yeah, Division I AA, they're even, there's many full ride scholarships. It's usually full ride. I know at the Division I single A, it's full ride or walk on. They're all full ride scholarships. For us, it's not that way. When you visit, we are having to put a monetary value to the player if we're talking athletic scholarship money. And it's not always the easiest thing, and it's not always based on how good that player is at lacrosse. There's a variety of factors that come in there. Do we need a player at that position? Did we take a player the year before and spend scholarship money on them the year before? Just kind of how our roster is managed as well really kind of comes into play with the scholarship money as well.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Iron Horse Lacrosse, the #1 lacrosse program in Texas for travel teams, camps, and clinics. For more information on Iron Horse, visit their website at www.ironhorselax.com. Has there ever been a time where you showed interest in a player and they reciprocate that interest in your program? However, after being in contact with them, or maybe having them on campus, having the parents on campus, you've decided it's not going to work out? And what maybe were some of those reasons off the field?
I don't think that there's no red flag from a visit, barring anything crazy happening on a visit. I've I've not had to deal with that as an assistant coach. But I think some red flags when you start to talk about guys are one, grades. I'll give you the adage of, if you have a 4.0, there's a lot of schools out there that are open for you. If you have a 2.0, there's a lot less schools out there that can recruit you. I think that, so grades is the number one thing. You got to make sure that you're doing your work in the classroom, because that can, you get that first phone conversation and we're having a conversation on September 1 and you have to say, oh, coach, I have a 2.1 and an 800 on my SATs, then it's a little bit more different conversation. The recruiting process is a little different than the guy who says I have a 4.0 and a 1300 on his SATs. So there's a wide spectrum in there, but you want to do as best as you can academically. And then kind of from there, the thing I'll bring up is social media. It's a huge thing in our culture today, and something that we check as soon as one of the first things I do, even before we're contacting recruits. So obviously we can't contact till September 1st of their junior year. But as soon as I evaluate and I classify that player, if I really like them, I'm going to start to look at them on social media. I'm going to look at their Twitter. I'm going to look at their Instagram pages. You have to be careful what you post and endorse. It's one of the first things that we look at. And we check highlight films, we check statistics, but we also look at your social media, because we have to be able to trust you as a person off the field and in our communities as well. The current climate in college athletics, we're held responsible for things that happen off the field sometimes. So we have to make sure that we're bringing the right kids and good people and good families into the programs. So social media is a big thing that we check. And that could definitely, if you're not posting the right stuff on social media, that could have us move to the next person on the list.
Yeah, that kind of goes to my next question is, have you had issues with social media as far as potential recruits or even current players go? And what are some tips for players listening to maybe get the most out of social media? The exposure, blasting out that highlight film, blasting out those honors, but also have the balance of not putting things on there that's going to jeopardize your college lacrosse career.
Yeah, I'd almost think of it like a business account. If you owned your own small business, you want to sell and market that small business, but you don't want to kind of be endorsing things that would be detrimental to that business. So I kind of think about it in that aspect. And you do want to get your highlight film out there, and it's an easy way to get your highlight film out there. You do want to get the honors. You do want to get, your GPA, maybe if you have a recruiting profile, your recruiting profile out there. Any way you can get information to us as coaches, that's great. It's obviously a great way to follow different programs and find out information on them as well. With everybody kind of putting stuff out there and their branding and social media. So I would say that you just have to look and look at each thing. Anytime you like or retweet or post something, you have to be careful and make sure that it's something that you really want everybody to see. Because once it's out there, it's out there.
Yeah, it's one of those things. It's like, if your grandma would approve, then you're probably all right.
It's a great way to look at it. If your grandparents or your parents would be okay with it, then it's probably good to post. If not, and they would kind of look at you sideways, I probably wouldn't post it.
Exactly. So switching gears a little, you're one of the few coaches in college that have also coached professional lacrosse and coaching the Atlanta Blaze. How does that experience help you develop your college players? Because a lot of those pro players are obviously very successful college players. How does that kind of correlate, and how does that help?
It was a very, very cool experience getting to work with all the tremendous players that we had for the Atlanta Blaze. I will tell you something about those guys, and I think you can see it around the league, even on other teams, is when you're doing something for a living or you're doing something for money, there's a certain level of professionalism and how you approach things. The way that those guys prepare before, not practicing a whole ton through the week and coming together on the weekend, the way they prepare all week long by themselves, the way they act around the locker room, the way they communicate with their teammates, the commitment to being great. I think those are things that you can take away and tell your players at the college level. It starts with the commitment and focus on being great. I think that at college, it's easy to kind of get pulled in a lot of different directions, whether it's academically or socially.
Yeah.
But you see these guys, they're able to kind of manage all that, and they really put their focus on being great athletes and great lacrosse players.
Yeah, being able to focus as a young student athlete, I mean, that alone is probably going to separate yourself from most of the student athletes coming in because it's such a big change socially, the day-to-day life, even the lacrosse itself. Maintaining that focus is probably huge. And obviously those guys at the pro level have mastered that.
100%. Being able to manage your time is a very critical aspect to being successful on a college campus.
Yeah.
And then we also had a really special group in Atlanta with the offensive players, Stats, Brian Cole, Shane Jackson, Zone, Brendan Sunday, Palasek, Mark Matthews. Some tremendous amount of skill and ability with that group. It was really impressive to kind of, and a joy to watch them pass the ball at sometimes. The chemistry that they built, sharing the ball and understanding when it was their turn to go, is something you hope for in every offense, and you work with them, and you hope that you can take and share those experiences with your college players as well. So that's another thing I'd probably take away from my season with the Blaze.
What is your goal for a player who comes to you at Syracuse, and kind of what are your hopes for him over the 4 years you'll be coaching him?
Yeah, I think that has not changed anywhere I've been. Anytime I recruit a player and we bring them to campus and I'm working with them, I hope that I can make them a better version of themselves. Athletically, definitely on the field, working hard, academically. If I can share any wisdom that I've learned along the way through my playing career and then my years as coaching and coaching professional, and then socially as well, just making sure that they're good people off the field and they're managing those situations and learning and growing to be an adult, and then helping them and keeping that relationship years after they leave school. They're here to play lacrosse for us for 4 years and go to school and get an education, but you hope that those relationships develop and they stay for long after those 4 years.
Yeah, and it's probably not easy to balance that because a lot of your coaching career kind of depends on wins and losses, but obviously it goes beyond that. It's more than lacrosse. I know some of these guys coming in look like they're 30, but they're still young. And so you have to develop them, not only as a player, but as a young man. And you kind of have both responsibilities there, even though one may outshine the other as far as where you're keeping your job and whatnot.
You're exactly right. And wins and losses, you definitely don't want to worry about the result. You want to worry about the process and what it takes to make these guys great individually. And then once they get good individually, then the unit can be good as a unit, and then the team can be good as a team. And then I think that's how you kind of breed success. So I'm not really focusing on winning and losing games, because if you do what you're supposed to do and you make these guys better as athletes and people, then wins take care of themselves.
Yeah, it's a product of the process. This is kind of a funny question, but let's say the lacrosse gods came down and said, hey, Coach Pat March, this player right here will be playing for you at Syracuse. However, he's only in 3rd grade. What would you have him doing now in middle school and then in high school to get prepared to be an impact player for you at Syracuse?
I think the young guys in the games, a young guy around the sport of lacrosse. I think back to when I was young and just going out and throwing the ball off the wall as much as you can, really falling in love with the game of lacrosse, practicing because I wanted to practice because it was a real joy. The more training, the younger you are, that you can do on your fundamentals, your shooting, your stick work, and get all that stuff dialed in. And then maybe not as a 3rd grader, but once you start to get into high school, your strength and conditioning, your agility, your weight room, your conditioning, I think we find that the guys that play early in college are the players that are fundamentally sound and physically ready to take the demands physically of what's going on the field. So yeah, I would say just fall in love with the game. Have fun, play the backyard, play the 3x, play the speed lacrosse, play all that stuff. Keep your stick in your hand as much as you can. Work on the fundamentals, and then when you're old enough, strength conditioning. But really have a love for the game.
What about multi-sport athletes? Do you encourage that? I mean, I'm sure to an extent, but how have you seen players pan out that maybe played football and lacrosse or basketball and lacrosse in high school at the college level as opposed to someone who maybe just played lacrosse throughout their younger career?
Yeah, I think each individual player is a little different. I think there's some guys that are specialized in lacrosse their entire high school career that are pretty good lacrosse players. I've seen guys that are multi-sport athletes that have become really good lacrosse players. I will tell you with the multi-sport athletes, because they are not specializing the entire year in a high school season, their ceiling tends to be a little bit higher because they may not have developed the lacrosse skill. Maybe they have, maybe they haven't, but they may not have developed that lacrosse skill that the guy who is more specialized and is only practicing that stuff has done. I played 2 sports in high school. I loved every second of my football career in high school and wouldn't have changed it for the world. You can see kind of what I would say athletic IQ, the crossover in our sport. Hockey guys are usually pretty good at picking up ground balls. Football guys are usually pretty good at pursuit angles and initiating contact. There's different crossover from basketball guys are usually good at IQ and seeing the game and setting picks. And help defense. There's so much crossover from other sports that I think that if you play another sport and you really enjoy it, then you should definitely do that. I don't think it would ever hurt you in the recruiting process, and for some coaches it may help you.
Yeah, you do get better in other ways playing those other sports. And I also think it does something for keeping the sport fresh, right? Playing lacrosse year round. As I see sometimes in high school players, guys who don't play other sports, they get quote unquote burned out. And being able to supplement a season of something different than lacrosse, but you're still gaining those lacrosse skills in other ways, that's a great way to not only get better, but keep lacrosse fresh. And so when you're out there, whether it's a recruiting event or a high school game, you're loving it.
Yeah, I think that's a really important thing. Especially with how long the recruiting process is and the recruiting actual playing period is where you're stretching from mid-October to mid-January in some aspects, and then obviously the entire summer. It's important to put that stick down and play other sports or just do something else and really kind of take some time off here and there. It doesn't need to be a grind 24/7. There is value in taking some time off and then coming back to it.
Yeah. So I got one final question for you. If you had every future Syracuse lacrosse player that is coming to play for you listening to this podcast right now, what would you say to them?
I would say fundamentals on the field, work hard, do as much shooting and stick work as you can, strength and conditioning, get as big, strong, and as fast and as in shape as you can. And from there, be good guys off the field and look forward to you getting here.
There it is. Coach Pat March, Syracuse University, thanks again for coming on. A lot of great info. Appreciate it, man.
Thanks, Luke. I really appreciate you having me on.
Thanks for listening to Lacrosse Recruiting 101. Catch us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Have a question for Luke? Email them to questions@lacrosserecruiting101.com.